The Book of Wisdom.
What in the world is the Book of Wisdom? Is it some hidden revelation from God that no one has ever known about? Bishop Barron is going to explain that this Book of Wisdom reveals wisdom that leads to scientific inquiry into investigating the order that this wisdom provides in the world around us. This is so fascinating. Check this out.
It is, in a way, it's a book as Greek as it is Hebrew, with this keen sense of the orderliness of the cosmos. And we heard it reflected in that beautiful psalm, that the heavens proclaim the glory of God. Many have argued that the modern sciences would never have gotten off the ground unless scientists believed in some deep level in the radical intelligibility of the world. And again, we take it so for granted, but think about that. It's strange that we should assume that every nook and cranny of the universe, on the grandest scale, on the smallest microscopic scale, is marked by intelligibility, ordered patterns. Why should that be true? Wouldn't it be far more reasonable to assume the universe would just take on a sort of chaotic form? Things kind of left to themselves tend to fall back into chaos. And yet, everywhere we look, there's signs of order. Which is why it is supremely ironic that, especially in the minds of a lot of our young people, it's the sciences that disprove religion. Can I make bold to say, au contraire, right? And I really mean that. On the contrary, the sciences prove the truth of religion. Because how do you explain radical universal intelligibility without appealing to some creative intelligence? And mind you, every single one of the founders of modern science, without exception, held this to be axiomatic, that they were discerning the patterns that reflect the mind of God. I found some traction, actually, apologetically, with this approach. Young people who revere the sciences, and God bless them for it. Science, that's the criterion of truth. Okay, fair enough. But go all the way to the bottom of the sciences, and you find exactly what the Book of Wisdom talks about. Exactly what the psalmist sings about. The heavens proclaim the glory of God. There's a related one I find also useful apologetically with young people. Young people are passionate about certain moral themes, aren't they? They're against the abuse of women, they're against slavery, they're against racism, and so on. And good for them. They're right to be against those things. The question I ask is, where do you think these objective moral values come from? Because no young person would say, well, that's just my little private opinion, and you're entitled to yours. No, they're going to fight you, tooth and nail to say that sexism is wrong and racism is wrong and slavery is wrong. Sure they will, and they're right to do it. But it begs that question. Where do these objective moral values come from? In C.S. Lewis's language, where do the laws of the moral life come from if there's no lawgiver? So can I suggest that the very things that often the skeptics of religion most revere are themselves paths toward authentic religion? And I think the Book of Wisdom hints at that. Okay, how about that? That's called a fake homily on reading number one.
Stick around for just a little bit longer. Bishop Barron is now going to talk about the spiritual physics of Christian theology. The spiritual physics. Apparently there's something physical about theology. Check this out.
In one sentence, he manages to use the word me 3 times, right? Me, mine, give it to me now. Well, this is all of us in regard to God. Give me that I might hang on to it. What happens, of course, is he fritters it all away very quickly and ends up destitute. Now, here's the spiritual physics. Here's exactly why. Grace only exists in gift form. That's what grace means. Gratia, it's a gift, right? Whatever we have, whatever exists in the world is a grace because it comes from God's love. So whatever exists in gift form. Therefore, if you want to hang on to it, you've got to give it away. And you'll find as you give it away, you get more. And when you get more, you give that away and you get more. And what happens is now you live in this kind of loop of grace. You live on the edge. You live on the fly. That's why, to me, it's so ironic. In the eyes of the world, religion is kind of this nerdy, this is for these fuddy-duddy type people. And, living in Las Vegas, we're living on the edge. No, they're not. They're living in the most tiresomely boring manner you can imagine. I mean that. We're the ones, if we take this language seriously, who are living on the edge. Think of the great saints. And our saint for today, Elizabeth, I love her story, this great queenly figure, this high, royal, regal figure who gives it away. She gives it away to serve the poor. When we give grace away, we get more grace, and then we give that away and we get more grace, and we live in that edgy space, risking it all, risking it from moment to moment. What do I know? I don't quite know what's going to come next, but whatever I have, I give. If you try to hang on to a gift, what happens? It stops being a gift and you lose it.
Throughout history, the relationship between faith and reason has often been cast as a battleground. Prominent voices like Nietzsche or even modern secularists might argue that belief in divine wisdom is an obstacle to scientific progress, a relic of superstition in an age of reason. They claim that science thrives not because of faith, but in spite of it, asserting that reason must sever itself from any notion of the divine to truly flourish. But here's the contrast, a distinctly Christian perspective that not only recognizes faith and science, but illuminates their deeper harmony. The Book of Wisdom presents us with an intuitive order, a framework embedded within creation that cries out for exploration and discovery. This isn't a coincidence or a construct of human imagination. It's a reflection of God's own rationality imprinted onto the universe he created. Far from being opposed to science, this wisdom is its very foundation, a whisper of the Logos, the divine word who sustains all things and calls us to understand his works. Just reference Colossians 1:16, for example. And what of this spiritual physics that Bishop Barron so eloquently describes? Grace, in this framework, is not merely an abstract spiritual concept, but the very essence and energy of God at work in the world. Just as natural physics reveals the laws governing matter and motion, spiritual physics reveals the undercurrent of grace governing and animating every aspect of life. It's grace that empowers our intellect to perceive order in the universe, and it's grace that drives the heart to seek understanding, not just of the natural world, but of the supernatural revelation of God himself. It points us beyond the natural world and ultimately illumines the natural world to reveal the supernatural giver, the Creator himself. The resolution, though, in Christian theology is breathtaking. Jesus Christ, the Logos made flesh, embodies this harmony perfectly. He is the source of wisdom that gives rise to scientific inquiry and the fount of grace that renews and sustains all creation. All scientists were Christians in the beginning, and they were just fundamentally in awe of who he was and what it ultimately meant about God. The so-called conflict between faith and science dissolves in the light of Christ. Science becomes not an act of rebellion against God, but an act of worship. So all of modernity is wrong. It's a way to marvel at the intricacy of the intuitive wisdom and order of this world. So as you marvel at the mysteries of the natural world, don't ever forget that the supernatural wisdom is what makes it possible. Grace invites us in to know the order of creation and to know the Creator himself. Who is the Creator himself? But Jesus Christ. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him.